We say hello to Twitch and YouTube. And we are also here on TikTok and, as always, on Discord. How is everyone today? Yes, we are reading today. My background hasn't loaded. What the hell? There we are. Yes, we are reading today. And we are reading The Architecture of Modern Empire. We are just starting with chapter 8. I am doing okay. How are y'all? Are you all doing well? I hope everything is going well. And I need to do my everybody in the reading room message. Yeah. All right, so we are on chapter 8 talking about terrorism. I'm hoping that, thank you, my lovey, that TikTok does not flag us for talking about terrorism. But hey, the US considers me an actual terrorist, so let's go. Thank you so much. So chapter 8, for anybody following with the book, that is page 155. Yee. Okay. It tastes like TV static. I've never had to edit myself on live, Finn, but yeah. It tastes like TV static. Me too. Yeah. Exactly, JJ. Sparkling water is TV static. Hello there, Moss. Good to see you. Moss is on the Twitch side. If you are unable to use any of the other streaming services, know that this is also on Twitch and YouTube. Oh, it's crab time. Yay! It's the crab. Okay, so to the reading. This interview was conducted in New Delhi in India on the 1st of January 2009. That's interesting because that was 17 years ago. 17 years ago was a turning point in my life as well because I had to move from my home city, Durban, to Johannesburg on sufferance, mind you. And I started a fourth degree at a university that I didn't know, where I didn't know anyone. I didn't know most of the people. I didn't know many people in the city. I knew maybe a handful. But this was also a year where things started heating up in terms of talking about terrorism. Because it was talk around leaving Iraq, leaving Afghanistan, talk about like the war on terror had been won, the newsrooms were packed with people who were very much liberal in their views. And I started a postgraduate journalism degree, which would essentially get my foot in the door in newsrooms. And that was when I also started my internship at the independent newspapers. And listening to everybody's talking about how things were being reported, it's what got me on my research journey into how power protects power in the media. And this interview, I actually never came across it. But it is called terrorism, no easy answers. And this follows on the back of her saying that fiction is the place where we tell the most truth. So David Brassemian asks, you've been spending time in Kashmir. There has been a series of elections over the past couple of months that have been heralded, at least by the mainstream press in India, as a great referendum for freedom and democracy and a rebuke for the separatists. What is your understanding of what happened? She says, the thing I worry most about is losing the language with which to describe what's happening in Kashmir. It's almost as though you need a deep knowledge of what's going on to understand the election. In August, even when I was there was an incredible spontaneous uprising with hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. This time I was there in the silence, and still I could hear the noise in my head. Azadi, Azadi, Azadi. The fruit sellers were weighing their fruit, chanting, Azadi, Azadi. Azadi means freedom. The people on buses, the children on streets, it was as if the sky was chanting it. Azadi means freedom. Azadi means freedom. Azadi means a lot of things, including freedom in a nuanced way, because that in itself is a contested term in Kashmir. And then that non-violent uprising was presented to the leaders of the separatist movement by the people. It wasn't that the leaders led the movement, but the people came, dusted off the mothballs, pulled the leaders out onto the streets and presented them with a kind of revolution. The Indian government's response to this was the harshest curfew ever imposed on Kashmir. Days and days and days together, razor wire, steel walls, people prevented from moving between districts and villages. Sound familiar? Many Kashmiris killed. There are between 500,000 and 700,000 Indian security personnel in the valley of Kashmir. They are spread out and patrolling all the time, so to put down this uprising wasn't hard for them in a military sense. When I found out I was pregnant 8 years ago, around this time, somebody in the hospital asked me, so are you thinking about names? And I said Saoirse, if it's a girl. Saoirse, Irish, meaning freedom, or Azadi, if it's a boy. Or Azad. Because so central is freedom, the concept of freedom is so central to our liberation as a whole that we must never lose sight of what we're fighting for. That was August. Then there was a debate about whether or not to call elections because everybody feared there would be a complete boycott, which have become more or less boycotted in the past. The separatists called for one, and to everybody's shock and surprise, there was a huge turnout. Nobody could understand what had happened. Where had the sentiment gone? Where was that outburst of a desire for freedom that was being expressed in the streets? How did it suddenly disappear? The way in which the election was called was interesting. A couple of districts in Jammu and Hindu-dominated. A couple of districts in Jammu are Hindu-dominated. The Bharatiya Janata Party has never been empowered there. But there is still a sort of political divide between these districts in Jammu and the Kashmir Valley. There's the Ladakh, Doda, and Kishtwar. And there are some parts of the Kashmir Valley that are under the boot of the army. If you travel in Kashmir, you'll see that there are army controls in the inhalation and exhalation. It controls everything. That is a beautiful way of putting it. In the inhalation and exhalation of the valley, it is army control. That's a beautiful way of putting it. The way elections were called was brilliant if you look at it from the Indian government's point of view. These places were traditionally the army's these places where traditionally the army's fiat rules went to the polls first. Without wanting to get into too much detail for an audience that's not familiar, the point here is that there was a big turnout, except in the cities. The turnout was low in almost all cities and towns, but the turnout was high in villages. I went back to Kashmir just now to understand for myself what it was all about. The last stage of the polling in Srinagar was due to happen, so the police put me under house arrest, which revealed more than it hid. They're so frightened of anybody who has a point of view any different from that of the Indian state seeing anything. Before the polls happened, they conducted a massive round of arrests. They arrested not just the leaders of the Hurriyat separatist group, but the workers, activists, and young people who were seen to have led these protests. Hundreds of people were put into jail. Any repressive state will put people under house arrest, will arrest them and put them in prison before they let the truth be known. And in many cases, and especially the case in what's known as Israel today, journalism is suppressed for that very reason. They are targeting journalists in Gaza for that reason. They have banned Al Jazeera from operating in the West Bank for that reason. Oh, and of course, East Jerusalem. I'd like to do a little exercise. Without looking at the actual map of Palestine, just get the outline of Palestine. Just this outline here. And on your phone, draw how much land you think belongs to the Palestinians. Just like either circle or squiggly lines, whatever. Just draw out how much land you think belongs to the Palestinians on a blank outline of Palestine. And then after the reading, I'll post a current map of what land was given to the Israelis and what land they have taken and what land belongs to the Palestinians now. It'll be interesting to see. In all of those spaces, any soothsayer is repressed. And I do see writers, especially fiction writers, as the soothsayers. Many liberal Indians say that the polls were free and fair. Of course they do. The first question you have to ask is, when you have that kind of a densely deployed army, can you have free and fair elections? Is it possible? Electoral observers and liberal Indians went to Kashmir and they didn't see people being pushed to the polling booths at the end of a bayonet, so they said there was no coercion. But the people of Kashmir have internalized what it means to live under an occupation and how they deal with it. Ooh, that internalized colonization. When you know nothing else, how can you call it coercion? The people of Kashmir have internalized what it means to live under an occupation and how to deal with it. And they do have a long-term view because they have to survive. Any abuse victim has to survive under the thumb of their abuser. So there comes a point you just shrug, sigh, and say, okay. Is that still consent? Of all the things that happened was that the main party, the National Conference, which is now coming into power, campaigned openly saying that these elections have nothing to do with Azadi. They're just about bread and butter issues. Sarak, Pani, and what was the slogan? Sarak, Pani, Bijli. It means roads, water, and electricity. Which is funny because bijli is also the word for lightning. I think that quite explains the fact that in urban areas where they are more secure, people didn't feel the need to vote, whereas in rural areas, it's not actually sarakbani and bijli so much as a thin layer of protection from occupation. For example, when the dreaded special operations group picked up somebody, you need somebody to appeal to, and that somebody is a politician. So, for example, people were telling me that there's one particular member of the Legislative Assembly who keeps getting voted back into power. Just before the elections, his MO was to have the army pick up 5 or 6 young men from that area, and then the people go and petition him. Then they get release and earns their eternal gratitude. These are all sorts of invisible things that happen. There are many other reasons, for example, just how the stories are emerging that this election, more than any other, there were hundreds of candidates who were fielded. Each of them, slightly in feudal areas, has a certain number of relatives and friends who vote for them. Because the main thing in these elections was that the government was so keen to encourage turnout, regardless of how it happened, to show off that this is a democracy. In fact, the day I left Kashmir, all these defeated independent candidates were having a press conference in a restaurant called Addus, talking about how they all had been offered money by the Intelligence Bureau to stand for election, and then some of them weren't paid, and now they're disgruntled. Hi. There are other issues. For example, there's this group of renegades known as Ikwanis, former militants who turned into dreaded killers working for the government. Some Ikwanis, and sometimes their sons, stood for election, and some people went out to vote against them. So there were a number of factors. But people did come out and vote. The way I see it is that people realize that they're lying on a bed of nails and the elections are like a thin layer of sponge, a way of getting by, a way of continuing to live. That's not living. They are not in any way going to permanently solve the problem of Kashmir. What the Indian government has done over and over again is just crisis management, sweeping things under the carpet and then hoping it'll go away. And then it resurfaces in different forms. I was in Kashmir when this sort of free and fair press of the mighty government of India arrived to gloat over the elections. People who knew nothing about Kashmir, who were going there to give commentary, saying the most absurd things about how this was the end of the freedom movement. But to me, the saddest thing was that the Kashmiris I spoke to, without exception, said, "We've done this to ourselves." And I felt that this was a sort of psychological war on them, this lowering of self-esteem, forcing them to participate in the tactics of survival, which eventually make them despise themselves. And this was the deepest form of colonialism. Someone said we feel like Shias at Muhram. We whip ourselves and draw our own blood, and then the Indian propaganda machine puts salt in our wounds. I keep on going back to Stephen Bantu Biko. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And it's why my people, the Indian people of the diaspora, specifically in South Africa, I call my whole race deputy whites, because we are this colonized. It's different to understand the full extent of this, but what people really want is being thwarted again and again. Everybody is speaking on behalf of everybody else. As a citizen of India, I feel uncomfortable. I feel that we can't gloat about doing this to somebody. Of course, India will always be able to manage it because it's a small valley. But then again, I don't think this will always be possible. The price of holding down the Kashmir Valley, which was being paid mostly by Indian soldiers who are mostly poor from India who don't count, is suddenly being paid by the Indian elite in 5-star hotels in Bombay. That puts a totally different spin on things. How Indian people still say Bombay and don't call it Mumbai. You write that the Indian military occupation of Kashmir makes monsters of us all. What do you mean by that? And this we can absolutely apply to Palestine too. It makes us complicit in the holding down of a people by military force. It makes us complicit in the propaganda. It makes us complicit in lies, and eventually it makes us people who are unable to look it in the eye. If you were to question the average Indian, the only thing they know is that they are terrorists in Kashmir. They wouldn't be able to tell you that 60 or 70,000 people have been killed in this war. They wouldn't be able to tell you about the dubious morality of India holding onto this place. They say Kashmir is an atut ang, which means an inseparable limb of India. It is not. Borders are colonial things. Kashmir was always its own little place, until the British drew lines around their territory versus the French. Yes, Kiara, I was imagining an anthropomorphic rabbit doing garden work because we don't have that service in South Africa. Thank you so much, my love, Justin. Okay, my feet are so cold. Apparently, it's going to be the coldest week ahead. Yay. Yeah, we have one of the coldest weeks coming up. Apparently, there's going to be snow in Johannesburg. Can you tell I'm so happy? Yay. Snow in Johannesburg. Yay. Okay, don't get me wrong, I fucking love snow. But with the kind of cold that we have here, absolutely the fuck not. And there are also close to 10,000 people missing. They've just disappeared. The point is, it doesn't seem to occur to anyone that Kashmir was never part of India. It was an independent kingdom. So even today, when they gloat about elections, if you say, why don't you have a referendum, as was promised by the UN, they say, things have moved on. And that is how they justify Palestine too. India, as a state, justifies the theft of Palestinian land by saying, oh, that was then. You say that it allows Hindu chauvinists to target and victimize Muslims in other parts of the country. When the elections were rigged in 1987, the movement in Kashmir became militant. Young men were taking up arms and crossing the border to Pakistan to train and then return. One of the fallouts was the exodus of the small community of Kashmiri Pandits or Hindus from the valley. The king who signed the accession document was a Hindu ruler over Muslim subjects, so this small minority of Hindu Kashmiris was a powerful minority. Because they feared for their safety, rightly so, and because the governor, Jagmohan, quite unforgivably said that the government couldn't protect them, they facilitated the exit of these Hindu Pandits from the valley. The poor among them ended up living in refugee camps in Jammu. They still live in refugee camps in Jammu. I was talking to my dad about this a couple of days ago, and I said, you know, there are very few places where there are refugee camps in one's own country. Some of them, you can see, like, there are no refugee camps for South Africans in South Africa. Our Freedom Charter has seen to that, you know. and yes, we have our issues, but they are refugee camps for Palestinians in Palestine who were displaced. They are refugee camps for Kashmiris within Kashmir who have been displaced. They are refugee camps for Lebanese people in Lebanon. And they weren't just displaced by this unseen entity. They have been displaced by their colonizer. But if you look back on how colonialism works, the Bantustans in South Africa, those were refugee camps. People displaced and driven into 13% of the country's land. This was at the time of the Taliban coming into power in Afghanistan, the BJP leading the Rath Yatra towards the demolition of the Babri Masjid, and the rise of Hindu chauvinism. The Kashmiri Pandits were wielded like a club by the chauvinists in India and used to whip up this anti-Muslim sentiment. Of course, in that orgy of hatred, the whole manifesto of hatred of the BJP eventually led to the destruction of the Babri Masjid and the coming to power of the BJP, the genocide against Muslims in Gujarat, the bombings in Bombay in retaliation for the Babri Masjid, the genocide in Bombay against Muslims by the Shiv Sena, and the rise of this ugly, divisive politics. I don't think that was the rise of it, though. And it's a rare thing for me to disagree with Arundhati Roy, but I don't think that was the rise of it. The rise of it was 1947. When Britain unceremoniously divvied up India, Pakistan, Kashmir, Jammu, Bangladesh, and said, y'all fight it out now. And then they left. What do people you spoke to in Kashmir think of Pakistan? That's interesting. When I was there in August, along with chants of Hum Kya Chahte Azadi, which means what we want freedom, I heard in equal measure, Jive Jive Pakistan, long live Pakistan. Yet if you question people, there are many reasons. If there were a referendum in which people were given the option of India, Pakistan or Azadi, I'm sure the overwhelming majority would want freedom. If they were given only an option between India and Pakistan, it's not my place to say this, but my gut feeling is that Pakistan would win hands down. India says Pakistan is fueling terrorism in Kashmir. I think people see Pakistan as a self-serving yet important support for the freedom movement in Kashmir. But let's be honest. Pakistan wants the land, India wants the land. The war isn't over Hinduism and Islam. It's not over Kashmir or Jammu. It's over territory and resources. It's not about what's important to Indian or Pakistani history. It's who can amass the most wealth. Yep. 103. Okay, it's 40 degrees clitoris. Okay, gotcha. Okay, I need to sit up for a second. I've lost my shoe. So when it comes to any colonial power saying this is what's good for the people, this is what's bad for the people, this is This is why they want us to think what's down is up and what's up is down just because they say so. No, I don't buy into that bullshit. But I am going to take a wee break. I'll be right back. And this is Grace, I'll be back. No, I understand that. I understand how it can be so annoying. And my mic was still on this entire time. Suddenly it gets very French. Croissant.
It's been off until a few seconds ago on Discord.
Yeah, no, this is on Twitch and YouTube. I usually switch off the mic, but I didn't this time.
Oops.
Oopsie. Yeah, Finn, if you rejoin the server, I can give you a lot of resources. Film noise covered the hot mic on Twitch. Oh, okay. Thank you. So, yeah, but I mean, this is, I've got a whole lot of resources to explain to older people, especially. It's why I created those resources. And you can translate it into German if you want as well. Yeah, I've been doing a lot for years. Okay, when I can, you won't be able to see it. Yeah, you won't be able to see it. The Palestine flag that I have behind me is a newish one, but the one that I have on the wall next to me, that I've had since I was 13. So I've been doing this a long time. Okay, so back to Kashmir. And I want you to think about how Kashmir relates to Palestine and to other colonized places in the world. Okay, all right. But yeah, rejoin the server and I'll point you in the direction of a whole lot of resources. So he asks, there is awareness also that the state there is not only exploding but imploding. And she says in response, I think there is an awareness of that, but what people have experienced is the brutality of the Indian state. So it's foregrounded for people in Kashmir at this point. It's a bit theoretical to say maybe it'll be worse for them than say, then it's our problem. Why are you worried about our problems? It's been a difficult time for Muslims in India, so to imagine that Muslims will be longing to be part of India when they don't have to be is a hallucination. Indian Muslims have a completely different problem from Kashmiris. Indian Muslims have a different issue here because they have to live here. They have to find peace in this fascist atmosphere. But Kashmiris see themselves as people who have a choice. Yes. And that's incredible. And I'm glad that you're there. They don't have to put their heads down and kiss ass. If you go around Kashmir, people ask you, have you come from India? They don't consider themselves Indian. Let's talk about the attacks in Mumbai that began on November 26, 2008, which India referred to as 2611. I was in Islamabad, Pakistan, by the way, watching this on television. It struck me that it was... Good night. I love you. Thank you for the tea. You're handsome. It was like a 3-day serial. You would go to bed at night and wake up in the morning, turn on the TV, and it was continuing. The out-of-breath commentary and reporting was stunning. You talked about the media coverage of the Mumbai attack, but initially you were reluctant to even write about it. I know you're working on a novel and you want to focus on that, but people came up to you on the street to ask, are you going to write something? And I think, especially for somebody who is a political commentator such as Arundhati Roy, she is more of a political commentator than she is a novelist, because she's only written 2 novels, both of them brilliant. The second one, which is not as spoken about as the first, is called The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. And It deals with these kinds of issues, but it also deals with gender and religion and India being India. She says, it was a difficult decision for me to write about it. There's a lot of ugliness in the air. People who were prepared to tolerate the people like me were already straining because of my views on Kashmir, which are just not acceptable in India. And then to write about Mumbai. Yet it became much harder not to write about it than to write about it, because the elite had cornered the TV channels. And there was the spiraling ugliness and this baying for war. And then there was this way in which it suddenly appeared as if this was the first time such a thing had happened in India. Because it was the first time that the golden heart of India, the absolute elite, had been targeted, which raised a lot of interesting things to write about. Predictably, people annoyed with what I've said have twisted my views to say she justifies it or she thinks it's okay for rich people to be killed. I've been told the same thing. When fires broke out in a place called St. Francis. Now, St. Francis in South Africa is a place where a lot of the white elite have their holiday homes. When a fire broke out there and destroyed a lot of the homes, I said, in the famous words of the police officer who was one of those responsible for the killing of Stephen Bantu Biko, when he was asked how he felt about it, he said, "Dit laat my koud. It leaves me cold." I was asked, so what about this? The fires in St. Francis? And I said, "Dit laat my koud." And people were like, oh, you're saying that it's okay for rich white people to lose their homes because it's rich white people. I said, no, I just don't care. And no, they were not losing their homes, they were losing houses. What it does mean in this country, where it really doesn't matter what happens to poor people, it does matter that, well, more than 100,000 farmers have killed themselves. It doesn't matter as long as only poor, impoverished soldiers are paying the price to hold down Kashmir. But when your best and most beautiful citizens are paying the price, then what? Living in this country, watching and reading the news, there was dead silence about the elephants in the room. One of the terrorists, Ajmal Kasab, spoke about Kashmir, Gujarat, and the Babri Masjid. But it was as if he hadn't, as if those were not the issues at all. This was just a mad pathology. So the effort was to push everything away and say this was a text without context. And it was something that became very, very dangerous. And isn't that always the case when it comes to an oppressor? They want to remove the context. They want to make everything about the 7th of October. I hope you get some rest, Finn. And I'm sorry that it's really tough. We have to keep on trying, though. And we will. We really will get there. I suggest that you pick up a book called, I can't remember who's the author, but the book is called Someday We Would All Have Been Against This. Yeah.
Give me one sec. I have that book.
Yes, I have the PDF somewhere, but I was given a review copy, but yeah.
It was by Omar El Akkad, Akkad.
Omar El Akkad.
Yes.
Someday we will all have been against us.
Yes, one day everyone will have always been against this, but it has, in slightly darker writing, so when it's read in the full context, one day when it's safe, when there's no personal downside to calling a thing what it is, when it's too late to hold anyone accountable, everyone will have always been against this.
Thank you so much, Grace.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Justin. It's in the server as well. Yes, it's true. I have tried not to write about it, but I was literally pushed into it. People on the street would come up to me and ask, "What are you thinking?" I think that's because I'm not writing as a lone individual. I don't want to claim some unique voice. Actually, outside the mainstream media, if you read what was being written on the internet and said on the streets, there was remarkable maturity in response. There was a clamor to link 26/11 to the terrorist attacks in the US on September 11, 2001. This was India's 9/11, and now there's been the significant legislation passed as a result. A new agency has been created called the National Investigation Agency. What has been the political upshot of this in terms of civil liberties and human rights? Can you see the parallels? Why was ICE created? And what was the narrative? The government has to do this for your safety. Jewish people are being targeted everywhere in the world, so we need our Zionist state in our ancestral homeland for our safety. It's never for the people's safety. It's always for power and resources. This is an important question, which I have no doubt that you understand in a nuanced way, being an American, but there is a difference, that is their completely different set of reasons for why the government and elites are pushing for these laws. It doesn't have to do with the fear of terrorism only. What is happening in India right now has to do with another battle, a battle that's not on television, the battle that's being fought in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, the battle of the poor against displacement, the battle of the Maoists against mining, which is a far bigger battle. And ultimately, it's the same thing, I reckon, because it's power and resources. Because ultimately, it's not about safety. And it also plays up into the hands of global Islamophobia. This is where these laws come into play. Binayak Sen, a medical doctor and human rights activist in Chhattisgarh, has been held as a dangerous terrorist in prison now for almost 2 years with no evidence whatsoever, no bail. These laws are really for people governments don't like, who have nothing to do with terrorism. When is Marwan Barghouti being released? Nor do they have really anything central to do with fear or desire to prevent terrorism, but they have to do with giving government power to criminalize democratic spaces. The aim is to criminalize the democratic space, to prevent people from speaking, working, organizing a mass movement. This is what is going on beyond the floodlights in the rest of India. Oh, hello, puzzle piece. The magazine India Today has named The Terrorist as its newsmaker of 2008. The accompanying article has photos of accused terrorists, all of whom are Pakistani. How does one address the issue of terrorism? You have people who have total disdain not only for the lives of others but for their own. How can you reach them? As if they're in another zone entirely. And she says that is the problem. Those particular individuals have obviously departed to another station and communication links have been cut. So if you try and look at whatever policies you make as some way of stopping terrorism forever, you're bound to fail. The only thing you can do is to look at the conditions in which more and more anger, despair, and resentment are being created. How do you change the chemistry there? India today has pictures of all various Muslims whom they see as terrorists. All of them are under trial, but a whole lot of Hindus who have been accused of bombing and killing people, including senior serving officers in the Indian army, are on trial as well, but none of them are pictured. And that is important. And that is where I'm going to stop for today. We are stopping on page 164, and we'll pick up next week. Any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then I shall end it here for today. I'm going to say good night to Twitch and YouTube. If you find these readings helpful, please hit up my pay links in my link tree, because I do these readings for free and I need to raise $290 by the end of next week. So yeah, if you can. Obviously, it's not required, but yeah, if you can show some support, that would be really, really nice. And I have a little under an hour to talk to my partner, so I'm gonna go. I'll see you tomorrow. Where's this thingy? There we go. I don't know what happened to all of these things. My orders and everything are all gone wonky. I don't know what's going on here. Nope. It's just not doing it, the things. I'm just going to end it right here. Okay, bye.